Super League vs. Yosa is one of those fights that has completely changed the way I approach fighting. And this doesn't come down to karate versus Muay Thai. No, this comes down to three super simple adjustments that anybody can make. And I promise you, if you implement these, your career as a fighter will change completely. Let me explain. One of the big problems that every fighter will encounter is fighting someone who is technically superior to you. This is usually a fighter who's done it for longer and just understands fighting better than you. But that's exactly what makes Yuki superior. Now, to explain what makes Yosa so good, I need to introduce you to a fighter that everybody struggles with. This guy is one of the most deceptive, one of the most off-rhythm strikers I've ever seen. Let me introduce you to a beginner. This dude's been fighting for like a week, you still have to remind him what hook is, and yet you struggle with him. Now, this isn't because every beginner is some phenom of the sport. No, it comes down to a couple of things. Now, while the beginner does these because of a lack of knowledge, Yuki does them intentionally. Let me explain. The first thing that Yuki does so well is his range control. Essentially, what makes Yuki's range controlling ability so great is karate. Karate has become a bit of a laughingstock in the fighting community because of how commercialized it has become. A lot of fighters write it off as not real enough. This is flat out naive. Karate has maybe the greatest arsenal of techniques of any martial art, and this versatile arsenal is the exact reason why Yuki is so good. Obviously, range control comes down to instinct as well, but that will come naturally, and it's hard to really work on that other than just grinding reps upon reps. Some of Yuki's best range control comes from his immaculate defense. He's great at lean backs and also pullbacks. These techniques obviously open up the ability for counters, but more than anything shows control, which looks good for the judges. Those are pretty standard techniques, but he'll also use stuff like the gouging knee to stop a blitzing opponent. You won't often see fighters using this technique because it's often considered a bit newbie. Now, there are so many techniques here that I can't really fit into this one segment, but if you're interested in learning more about range control, we've got 15 exercises at the price of just $5 that are going to skyrocket your range control ability. These include close range, long range, keeping the range, all of that. Check the link in the description down below if you're interested. It's only $5 and it helps the channel a ton. So basically, Yuki's range control comes down to the obvious reps upon reps upon reps, but also a very versatile arsenal. He can do lean backs, pull backs, he can crash into you, and this seems super simple, but what amateurs will usually do when someone is trying to close the range is move around, or just freeze, and that's not going to cut it at a high level. So invest in these weird techniques and add them to your arsenal. The second thing that Yuki does, and this is a big one, is his control of rhythm. Rhythm is very often an afterthought for amateur fighters, and that's very understandable. However, fighters who prioritize mastering rhythm are often the ones who have the best performances. Think of like Max Holloway. We think of him mostly as a volume striker, and that's a big part of it. But defensively, he's a master of defensive rhythm. Now, what Yuki is great at is offensive rhythm. Now, this is complicated, but it essentially comes down to understanding when your opponent expects to get punched. Think of it like this. Most people, when they're throwing their jab cross, will throw it like this. 1-2, where they follow each other immediately. Some fighters, like Masato, will break this rhythm by throwing the cross while the jab is still out, so it'll be more like a 1-2, very fast. Now, what Yuki is great at is stretching the rhythm. So he could, for example, throw a 1-2. See that little pause there? This works wonders. This works because if you're used to a regular 1-2, you're going to think, oh well, I guess the combo's over, and you're going to loosen your defense. That's when the cross comes and catches you a bit off guard. Now, it's obviously happening in a split second, but you get the idea. That's one way to do it, off rhythm strikes. He'll do this with teeps and punches, but more than anything, he'll do it with his kicks. He is the calf kick master, and what makes them especially dangerous is this off rhythm. But the other way he'll do this is by interrupting. Let's look at the Super League fight. He utilizes a lot of teeps, footwork feints, and hand feint. Now the teeps are pretty self-explanatory. He catches you mid-entry with a teep and it forces you to reset. Simple. Footwork feints and hand feints are, however, some of the most important techniques he uses. This is very similar to Adesanya. These feints put your opponent into more of a defensive state. They're thinking, oh, what's he gonna do now? And similarly to the teeps, they force them to react and reset, which costs them time and momentum in the fight. The last part of the rhythm I want to bring up are these sneaky cut kicks. He used these beautifully against Superbek, and they're another great technique to add. These do a ton of damage and also punish your opponent for kicking, which is great. Essentially, controlling the rhythm comes down to hesitation. He also does this with cut kicks, feints, tricky footwork, and great teeps. The last part I want to bring up is power. Now, power is one of those things that I think is both overrated and underrated by many coaches. Power is one of those things that is very misunderstood. Now, Yuki, he's a bit of a power puncher, so I think it's fair to use him as an example. While he doesn't get a lot of knockouts, he does clearly hit very hard. Now, the secret to landing more of your knockout shots comes down to a simple trick. You need to adjust. Mid fighters throw everything at the same power level and occasionally throw a really hard shot. Good fighters are able to balance hard punches and lighter punches in different combos. The best fighters like Yuki are able to adjust their power mid-combo. At the amateur level, defense is not always the best, especially boxing defense. And so learning to adjust your power mid-combo is a game changer. This, once again, is connected to rhythm, kind of. Let me explain. If you're throwing a hard combo, that puts your opponent in a very defensive mindset where the sole focus is on surviving and defending themselves. You're not likely to try some new cocky head movement when Mike Tyson is coming at you full power. And on the flip side, if you're throwing very light combo, your opponent might take more risks. They might try to counter. So by mixing these, going easy to hard and then back again, you put them in that second mindset. Then you catch them off guard with a hard shot. That puts fear into them and they get more and more hesitant, which allows you to work your game. If you're clever, you may have noticed a recurring theme throughout this video. Control. Control is the most important factor for Yuki Yoza's success. Yuki controls the range, making them miss and forcing them to be over-aggressive. He controls the rhythm, making them hesitate. And he controls his own power, making them scared. Now, getting better at these three things will undoubtedly set you apart from the competition at the amateur level. Don't forget to check out the workout down below. It's only $5 and I'd appreciate it a lot if you at least considered it. Try it out in your training and let me know how it goes. As always, I appreciate the support and I'll see you in the next one.